chapters 11 through 20 of Against Celsus, Book 1, by Origen, translated by Frederick Crombie. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by David Ronald. Since, then, as reason teaches, we must repose faith in some one of those who have been the introducers of sects among the Greeks or barbarians, why should we not rather believe in God, who is over all things, and in him who teaches that worship is due to God alone, and that other things are to be passed by, either as non-existent, or as existing indeed and worthy of honor, but not of worship and reverence? And respecting these things, he who not only believes, but who contemplates things with the eye of reason, will state the demonstrations that occur to him, and which are the result of careful investigation. And why should it not be more reasonable, seeing all human things are dependent upon faith, to believe God rather than them? For who enters on a voyage, or contracts a marriage, or becomes the father of children, or casts seed into the ground, without believing that better things will result from so doing, although the contrary might, and sometimes does happen? And yet, the belief that better things, even agreeably to their wishes, will follow, makes all men venture upon uncertain enterprises, which may turn out differently from what they expect. And if the hope and belief of a better future be the support of life in every uncertain enterprise, why shall not this faith rather be rationally accepted by him who believes on better grounds than he who sails the sea, or tills the ground, or marries a wife, or engages in any other human pursuit, in the existence of a God who was the creator of all these things, and in him who with surpassing wisdom and divine greatness of mind dared to make known this doctrine to men in every part of the world, at the cost of great danger and of a death considered infamous, which he underwent for the sake of the human race, having also taught those who were persuaded to embrace his doctrine at the first to proceed, under the peril of every danger and of ever impending death, to all quarters of the world to ensure the salvation of men. In the next place, when Celsus says in express words, quote, "If they would answer me, not as if I were asking for information, for I am acquainted with all their opinions, but because I take an equal interest in them all, it would be well. And if they will not, but will keep reiterating, as they generally do not investigate, etc., they must," he continues, "explain to me at least of what nature these things are of which they speak, and whence they are derived," end quote, etc. Now, with regard to his statement that he, quote, "is acquainted with all our doctrines," end quote, we have to say that this is a boastful and daring assertion, for if he had read the prophets in particular, which are full of acknowledged difficulties and of declarations that are obscure to the multitude, and if he had perused the parables of the Gospels and the other writings of the law and of the Jewish history and the utterances of the apostles, and had read them candidly with a desire to enter into their meaning, he would not have expressed himself with such boldness, nor said that he, quote, "was acquainted with all their doctrines," end quote. Even we ourselves, who have devoted much study to these writings, would not say that, quote, "we were acquainted with everything," end quote, for we have a regard for truth. Not one of us will assert, quote, "I know all the doctrines of Epicurus," end quote, or will be confident that he knows all those of Plato, in the knowledge of the fact that so many differences of opinion exist among the expositors of these systems. For who is so daring as to say that he knows all the opinions of the Stoics, or of the Peripatetics? Unless, indeed, it should be the case that he has heard this boast, quote, "I know them all," end quote, from some ignorant and senseless individuals who do not perceive their own ignorance, and should thus imagine, from having had such persons as his teachers, that he was acquainted with them all. Such an one appears to me to act very much as a person would do who had visited Egypt, where the Egyptian savans, learned in their country's literature, are greatly given to philosophizing about those things which are regarded among them as divine, but where the vulgar, hearing certain myths, the reasons of which they do not understand, are greatly elated because of their fancied knowledge, and who should imagine that he is acquainted with the whole circle of Egyptian knowledge after having been a disciple of the ignorant alone, and without having associated with any of the priests, or having learned the mysteries of the Egyptians from any other source. And what I have said regarding the learned and ignorant among the Egyptians, I might have said also of the Persians, among whom there are mysteries conducted on rational principles by the learned among them, but understood in a symbolical sense by the more superficial of the multitude. And the same remark applies to the Syrians and Indians, and to all those who have a literature and a mythology. But since Celsus has declared it to be a saying of many Christians that, quote, the wisdom of this life is a bad thing, but the foolishness is good, end quote, we have to answer that he slanders the gospel, not giving the words as they actually occur in the writings of Paul, where they run as follows: If any one among you seemeth to be wise in this world, let him become a fool, that he may become wise. For the wisdom of the world is foolishness with God. The apostle, therefore, does not say simply that, quote, wisdom is foolishness with God, end quote, but the wisdom of this world. And again, not, quote, if any one among you seemeth to be wise, let him become a fool universally, end quote, but let him become a fool in this world, that he may become wise. We term then the wisdom of this world every false system of philosophy, which, according to the Scriptures, is brought to naught. And we call foolishness good, not without restriction, but when a man becomes foolish as to this world. As if we were to say that the Platonist who believes in the immortality of the soul and in the doctrine of its metempsychosis incurs the charge of folly with the Stoics who discard this opinion, and with the Peripatetics who babble about the subtleties of Plato, and with the Epicureans who call it superstition